On today's show,
The Warriors are who we thought they were, tying things up with a big win in the Grindhouse.
Teague pass alert. Jeff Teague puts on a show, and the Hawks even up the series with the Wizards.
And in the up-down report, we discuss John Wall's interesting suit.
Oh, I like it. It's Tuesday, May 12th. The starter starts now.
Good evening, Sweet World, and welcome to another playoff edition of The Starters. Whether you're joining us live online, you're listening to the podcast, catching us on YouTube, or watching on NBA TV, we're happy to have you. I'm Jay Skeets, and alongside me, as always, that's Tess Mellis.
It is a good evening, isn't it?
To my right, Starters blog editor, Trey Kirby.
Hey yo!
And finally, the international man of mystery, taking it to the max, Lee Ellis. Lee there. All right. On tonight's show, we've got the up-down report. We're going to debate the Pelicans firing Monty Williams today, and we'll give the thumbs up or thumbs down on John Wall's very interesting suit there last night. But we start in Memphis, where after losing 2 straight to the Grizz, the Warriors bounced back to win Game 4. They evened their series at 2 games apiece last night. Golden State's now 5-0 when coming off 2 straight losses this season, winning those games by an average of nearly 14 points per game. You see the 17-point win last night. Lots of great things, nice adjustments by the Warriors in this Game 4, but I think you got to start with the MVP, Steph Curry, in his game.
Yeah, Steph found himself a little bit, and he didn't come out firing to start the game. I thought Harrison Barnes really took it to the rim, and Steph didn't shoot for the first 7.5 minutes of the game. But after the other guys set the tone, Curry, again, he just sort of Steph Curry became the MVP. He was 8 of 12 on uncontested shots, while he was 5 of 15 in the previous 2. Steph hits open shots. That's what he does. The Grizzlies took him out of his game. He found himself finishing with 33. He was a scorcher. I mean, this team just removed the shackles of the Grizzlies and became the Warriors again for this game.
Great game from Steph Curry. I like that you brought up Harrison Barnes with a hot start there, and I think Draymond Green hitting a couple threes early.
Definitely.
Lee, you like that because when those guys are scoring early, it does take a little bit of the pressure to some extent off your shooters in Steph and Clay to try and go get points in a hurry.
Well, when they do score, then the Memphis have to respect their shot because Draymond Green, we know he's also struggled during this series. Once he gets a few baskets going, they can't then just leave him alone. The same with Klay Thompson. You know, if he's out there and he gets open looks, the way they do that is by spacing the floor. These guys get early baskets. Harrison Barnes another one, and it just opens up everything for the Golden State Warriors.
Harrison Barnes has been great this series.
Yeah,
a little
quietly great,
underrated, quietly
Yeah.
great in a 2-2 series has been really important. I like one huge adjustment defensively that Steve Kerr and the Warriors did last night, and that was putting Andrew Bogut, the 7-foot Aussie, on Tony Allen, a shooting guard who
Who's on him.
can't shoot. Yeah, that's exactly right. You can say on him in quotations because that was the game plan. We'll put Bogut on Tony Allen. You see the first shot, Tony says, okay, wide open. I'll knock down that jumper. Didn't go so well quite from there because Bogut, I mean, again, a mile away from Tony Allen, just ignores him. You're going to give him that shot. That's what Steve Kerr and the Warriors were doing, and that is not Tony's shot. He cannot knock that down with any consistency, even when he's inside there. He was struggling all night. And this is, I mean, I like this. This is why I love the playoffs.
Yeah.
That's an adjustment that you probably don't see a lot in the regular season.
Yeah, definitely not.
They applied in Game 4, and now you get to see what Jaeger does because Tony Allen didn't play a whole lot of minutes because, again, they were just completely sagging off of him. Barnes did a great job on Zach Randolph. You should point out defensively, doing the best as he could, giving up, 35, 40 pounds in that matchup. But now Jaeger has to decide, well, we got to keep Tony Allen out there to try and keep either Curry or Clay in check defensively, but he hurts us offensively, so how do you get him involved?
Well, it hurts just from Tony Allen not being able to shoot, but it also trickles down, too, because Zach Randolph doesn't get as many offensive rebounds because there's another guy boxing him out. He doesn't get as many touches because they're able to front him and have a guy behind him waiting for him. It's a huge decision for Dave Jaeger because how do you beat a team that's playing 4 guys man and 1 guy playing zone?
Yeah.
It's just basically a free safety waiting to mess things up.
Is there an answer?
I think he has to drive and drive
Tony?
and drive at the rim, and hope for some offensive rebounds and just be that sort of physical presence, and it just adds to what the Memphis Grizzlies are. I mean, it just speaks to what they are. That's what he has to do. He has to be on the floor. Those 15 minutes, I think, is a huge mistake. You just can't succumb to that. You can't just say, gonna pull the plug on our spark plug.
Defensively, yeah.
It was a real Greg Popovich move, I thought, by Steve Kerr to just say, no one's expecting this, we'll throw you out there. And as you saw, Tony Allen hit that basket, but it actually works against Memphis because then he gets confident stepping out, taking down those threes. And Steve Kerr said to his team, we'll live by those. Fine, you go out there, you can shoot as many times as you want, even if you knock down a few. We know that Tony Allen doesn't have a smooth stroke, so he's not going to be able to get that going and score, light you up for 35 points or so. And the other thing is, Tony Allen's great when the Grizzlies have a lead or it's a close game, but when they're down 20, then it really
hard
affects
to come back.
Yeah, it's very hard to come back.
He's not stepping out, knocking down threes.
No, so that's where it really helped Golden State last night. But Tony Allen's obviously such an important defender for them. You know he's going to start again, and the Grizzlies are obviously just going to try to keep it close.
Well, that's what I love about this. I love heading into Game 5 again, series tied 2-2. I can't wait to see what he does, because the Warriors would be crazy not to try and stick with something similar, where you have just a guy roaming completely. And Andrew Bogut, you said it there, Trey, because of this, because he wasn't playing anyone, he got to just hang out, 1 foot there in the paint, roaming, helping out on Gasol, helping out on Zach Randolph. I mean, this guy was everywhere. He had 3 blocks and 3 steals last night. The Grizz shot something like 2 for 18 at the rim with Bogey in there. So it worked perfectly. And we get to see what Coach Jagger will do in Game 5.
Yeah, it makes it hard for the bigs. It makes it hard for guys to find space cutting in the lane. It's just the classic way to make the Grizzlies beat you. You have to have their guards try to beat you, because there are going to be probably 50% of the games where they can't do it, especially Mike Conley looking more and more hurt as the series goes on, because he's been chasing Steph Curry around with a broken face.
Go ahead.
I think the Grizzlies just have to stay true to who they are. I mean, they got the Warriors away from who they were, those middle games there in Games 2 and Game 3. They have to be who they are. They have to just make sure their identity is shown. And that's Tony Allen. I mean, he is just such a big part of it. And I think it's just such a weakness to take him off the floor.
And what you saw there in Game 4 was Jagger saying, well, okay, Tony can't hit a shot. They're not playing him. Well, let's get Jeff Green in there, who's obviously a much better offensive player. Not going to light it up by any means. He's a guy that we've talked about for years.
Yep.
If he's aggressive, he looks great, but sometimes he's not there. He doesn't check into the game. Do you put him in there and just hope that you can outscore them? I mean, you're right. That sounds crazy. You got to play Grizzlies basketball.
Well, they don't have a lot of great three-point shooting, and he is one of their better three-point shooters. But again, if you're relying on that strategy, it's pretty high risk, low return, I think, because he might hit a couple, as you saw again late in the game. I think Vince hit one as well. Courtney Lee hit one. But by that stage, the Grizzlies, they're pretty much desperate, because they can't make up that deficit without someone like Tony Allen out there protecting guys like Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and forcing those guys to take tough shots. At that stage of the game, Steph Curry was so hot, he was feeling it. Klay Thompson, you saw him hitting one deep in the corner. Those shots weren't falling in Games 2 and 3. But now, when they're up and they're confident, things just drop.
Well, why did it take Steve Kerr, you think, so long to make this defensive adjustment?
Probably because they shot so poorly in Game 2. They thought, we're not going to shoot poorly again. They did in Game 3, so it's like, you can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. I believe that's the definition of insanity.
That's right.
That's what they say.
Yeah, he's crazy.
That's what people tell me.
Yeah, you're right. All right, take a break. Okay, well, I love that we have these best-of-3 series in some of these, series left in the playoffs. Love it. All right, got to take a break. When we come back, Jeff Teague, Big League Teague, helping the Hawks. Pull even with the Wizards.
He's got a lot of nicknames.
Welcome back to the starters. In the phone booth, Jeff Teague scored a team-high 26 points as the Hawks defeated the John Wall-less Wizards 106-101. Paul Pierce had an open look for a 3 to tie the game in the closing seconds, but he came up short. Bradley Beal was great, but it was the Hawks that sort of got back to basics in terms of moving the basketball.
Yeah, and they got up to a great start. That's what they needed. Coming in down 2-1, they just wanted to put the pedal down, and they did. 65 points in the first half, 30 assists in this game. I mean, they only scored 41 in the second half, but the 65 was enough to get them the victory, obviously. I thought Paul Millsap looked like an entirely different player than he did in Game 3, 19 points in only 27 minutes, and that sort of set the table for Jeff Teague, I thought. Him getting going, just getting some help. And then Teague was fantastic.
Game 3, Millsap had the flu-like symptoms. He looked like a completely different player. Jeff Teague, though, to me, it's weird with a team that plays team basketball like the Hawks to say this, but this conference semifinals, to me, comes down to Jeff Teague. With no John Wall, especially. Sure. And we don't really know his status yet. They're not saying he's out for the series by all means. He's apparently now getting to dribbling. But Teague last night, it's been what I've been saying here on the show the last couple of days. Like, with no John Wall out there, Teague has got to be aggressive. And we saw it at the end of Game 3, if you remember, in the second half, into the fourth there. Teague and Schroeder, Dennis Schroeder, who's been great, attacking, getting in, hitting those little floaters, getting to the line, and then opening up the open shots for your Horfords and your Millsaps. And they were knocking down uncontested looks like that.
People call him the Spurs East, and he is their Tony Parker. The same thing with the Spurs. They're not getting open threes and good shots if he's not getting in the lane. They need Jeff Teague to get in the lane. The threes are nice, but it was a point of emphasis, obviously, for the Hawks to get inside and create threes, playing inside out, and it actually worked. I think we're going to look back at that Game 3 that they had, that huge run, kind of like the Spurs last year, Game 4 against OKC. Corey Joseph has a huge dunk on Serge Ibaka, and it kind of just shows there's another way to do this. This is a new strategy we can try, and it worked out in Game 3, and it worked out again in Game 4.
Yeah, the Hawks got contributions from besides Kyle Korver, who the Wizards are still doing an amazing job of taking him out of this series, but your Horfords, your Millsaps, and your Korvers, or excuse me, your Teagues all chipping in last night.
I think there's ball movement, and then there's just being aggressive within that ball movement. The Spurs move it so well, but then you just need a guy to make it something happen. And obviously the Wizards are doing a great job of staying in front of guys, and that's where Teague just capitalized. He said he was that Tony Parker or that Manu, in years past, and just made it happen.
But it was Al Horford again hitting that mid-range shot. I mean, if we're going to keep on the Spurs analogy, it's that Tim Duncan spot. You just drop it off to him, and he just sits at the top of the paint there and knocks it in time and time again. You sort of underrate it. You don't think that it's always going in because it's not the prettiest shot. But he's so consistent with it, and he's been there all season long. Again, when he starts knocking it down, it means the defenders have to come to him, and then someone like Marcin Gortat, he can take him inside and finish around the rim. He just always contributes at both ends of the floor, but it doesn't ever stand out. It's not spectacular. It's just very, very solid and consistent.
He's in the Hall of Very Good.
Yes, he is.
Right now, absolutely. A big number for the Hawks in this game, too. You talked about the 65 in the first half, but I would think the 48 points in the paint to matching the Wizards, at least in scoring inside. And that just shows you either going into the bigs or, again, driving. And Millsap, there was that one stretch there where Paul Millsap just took over this game. With this particular play. I mean, look at this.
It must have been just a little spark in the locker room just to know that Paul Millsap is alive again.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a key.
I think he felt that he didn't perform for his team in Game 3 because he was sick. I mean, he had a very legitimate excuse, and he wanted to go out there and do it. He got in foul trouble as well, which looked like that could have proved costly for the Hawks. But instead, everyone again just sort of stepped up and covered for him.
I want to give
Mike Muscala, 14 years.
Yeah, the Moose.
I just like saying that.
That guy can, for a big guy, can step out and knock it down. Let's give a little credit, though. Again, no John Wall going for the Wizards, but Bradley Beal doing all he could to keep this team.
He was great. He was really great.
Paul Pierce knocking down threes in the first half, and we'll get to his potential game-tying shot at the end. But Beal, 34 points on 11 of 25 shooting. He was 4 of 8 from 3. Then he got to the line, Lee, 8 of 9 from there, 7 assists, 6 boards, 3 steals, 13 of those points coming in the fourth.
Yep.
I mean, this is a young guy, very young guy, putting his team on his back here.
Whatever happens to the Wizards in the playoffs, it's been a really good show by Bradley Beal. In the first round, he was fantastic, and now in the second round, especially with John Wall out, he's really stepped up and carried his team. He had a very rough season because of the injuries. He couldn't get going, and right now he's showing why. He's going to be an all-star in 2016.
I was happy to see. I was happy. I like that. I was happy to see Randy Whitman finally figured out the clipboard and which way it goes up or down, because a couple of the plays down the stretch, this became a close game. It was only a 5-point win. After the timeouts, he drew up some beautiful plays. First, it started with Beal off the curl. Then, almost the exact same play with Pierce going to Nene. And then here is the final look from Pierce.
He was too open.
Was he too open? That's what people think.
He did hesitate just a touch, and you mentioned those threes. He had hit 5 threes earlier.
Yeah.
He hesitated just a touch, and that's not what Paul Pierce does. He doesn't hesitate, but he just kind of took that little extra step with that right foot. Dug into it.
Didn't expect to be so open coming around the screen, is what you're saying.
Totally.
Why not?
That's a pretty good screen from Nene too, I think.
Well, totally legal.
Good. I don't know.
That's from the Kevin Garnett textbook of screening.
That's true. That's true. What's your feel on this series now? As it goes back to Atlanta, it's a tough series to try and figure out. Tied at 2. What does your gut say?
The Hawks got better against Brooklyn as the series went on. I think they're starting to expose the fact that John Wall's not there. John Wall may come back, and that makes a big difference for Washington, but I think the Hawks have just got their nose back in front.
You heard Paul Millsap after this game said, "This is the best we've played in a long time."
Yeah.
And I think that's tough to argue. I'm still with you on the Hawks going into this. I still think this could go 7, though. That's what I said at the beginning, and I'll stick with it, because if John Wall comes back, you could get that sort of Mike Conley sort of like inspiration sort of game where the Wizards get one. Be it in Atlanta, where they could win again, or at home for Game 6 on Friday night.
I'm starting to feel that they're not really playing above their heads, though, the Wizards without John Wall. I feel like they can perform like this night in and night out, whether John Wall is there or not. And as soon as he does come back, if he does come back, I think it's advantage them. Yeah, it helps you.
Let's hear what people think. Let us know on Twitter, #TheStarters. You leaning towards the Hawks or the Wizards in this very close series right now. We got to take one more break. But when we come back, well, I just lied to you. We'll take 2 more breaks throughout the show, but we'll take a break right now, and then thumbs up or thumbs down on the Pelicans firing head coach Monty Williams today. Come on back. Back with the starters into the up-down report, where the 4 of us figure out where we stand on some hot-button NBA topics. Ask you to do the same. Play along on Twitter, #TheStarters, with your thumbs up or thumbs down, or even in the YouTube comments. First one, guys. Monty Williams fired today by the New Orleans Pelicans. We got a lot of thumbs up. Lee is down. Why, Lee?
I am down on this. First of all, I'm surprised with the timing of it because the owner, Tom Benson, sent out a letter just after they were eliminated from the playoffs congratulating everyone. He even used Monty's name in that letter, and now he's fired him. But I think this actually reduces the chances of Anthony Davis signing that monster extension now.
Really?
Because I think it would be very risky for Anthony Davis to sign it until he's worked a whole season with a new coach. I think it's very important that he needs to get stability. We don't know who this coach is going to be. I suspect they have someone in mind. But I think it's very important for Anthony.
Let me ask you, do you think, sorry to interrupt, do you think Monty Williams was taking this team to the next level?
I think they surprised a lot of people by where they finished this season. I think they put up a good show against the Golden State Warriors. I think he deserved another season to figure it out.
I think Lee didn't answer your question.
Yeah, I know.
Because he knows the answer to it. He knows he's not the guy taking him to the title, and that's why the Pelicans said goodbye, because that's what's happening in the NBA nowadays. If you're a winning coach, that's not enough anymore. You have to be a great coach, and the Pelicans were 22nd in defensive efficiency with Anthony Davis on their team. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I think
to me it seems it says, we know this isn't the guy, let's move on. Let's not waste our chance at Anthony Davis.
If you're Anthony Davis' agent, would you advise him to sign or not sign that extension right now?
Well, if I'm Anthony Davis' agent taking a percentage on his huge contract, I'd say definitely sign it.
Yeah, okay, well, that makes sense. But I just think Anthony Davis now really needs to play out this next season and see where their franchise is heading. I think it's very important because who knows who that coach is going to be, how Anthony Davis is going to gel with him, how the team's going to gel. So I think it's a surprising and somewhat risky move.
Trey is right, though. This is the new NBA with coaches where we don't care if you win a lot of games. Vinny Del Negro with the Clippers, 56 wins. See you later. Lionel Hollins with the Grizzlies, 56 wins.
And a conference final.
See you later. Exactly. Mark Jackson, of course, 51 wins.
Yeah.
See you later. Scott Brooks, I mean, a different situation there maybe, but 45 wins. It doesn't matter.
The Pelicans aren't on the brink of winning the championship. They've still got another 2 or 3 years to grow and to develop and to get there. And I think Monty Williams at least deserved that opportunity, at least one more year, to see if he could take them to another level.
That's the question. They don't think he could do that. I
think.
He
did have
that's
5 years.
Exactly.
And there's only 3 other coaches that have longer tenures than him.
He had 5 years.
And those are sensational coaches, obviously, in Spoelstra, Carlisle, and Popovich.
He had 2 playoff appearances in 5 years. Had Chris Paul for one of them.
And you know, we call it a playoff appearance, but I don't think they make the playoffs if OKC is healthy.
Right.
I think just saying that they made the playoffs is an accomplishment, and he should be he should still have his job because of that. It's just a faulty sort of reasoning.
Well, I don't think so. I mean, they made it. It doesn't really matter. There's always injuries to other teams.
Yeah, but they think they should be better, and that's all. They should have more wins. And and in Game 3, he mismanaged that game in against the Golden State Warriors. People were calling for David Blatt's head.
Yeah.
I think Monty Williams. I mean, he definitely has to be questioned. He had 5 years, and in the NBA, that's an eternity.
But he didn't have 5 years with this team and with this Anthony Davis.
Yeah.
No, but they know that. They know they have one of the handful of guys that could probably take you to a championship.
For sure,
in Anthony Davis if he continues to grow the way he has. They know that. So now it's suddenly like 48 wins, whatever, making the playoffs, whatever. They want to get on the right path to winning a championship.
But
they don't think it's Monty Williams.
But I don't think they're going to get to that level anyway for a minimum of 3 years, myself.
Wow.
Well, see, it depends who they bring in.
Yeah.
It depends who they bring in, of course.
Roster, obviously.
All right, next one here. Love this one. Up or down on John Wall's Game 4 suit. I don't know if you can call it a suit because a suit usually your jacket matches your pants.
Okay, it's a blaze.
And he had
Blaze.
the half plaid, half solid, lapel-less sports jacket with the red pants. Trey and myself down. Tass, you're up. Lee, what? Lee's not even giving a thumbs up or thumbs down.
Can't answer a question.
I couldn't decide because I actually don't mind the jacket. It's the pants that got me because the bright red I don't think really matched the top. I would definitely wear that jacket and tie. The pants.
That's not a surprise.
Yeah, that was one of the things that immediately turned me off to the suit was when Lee said he would wear the jacket. I was like, no way. But to me, this is a legendarily bad NBA suit, one we're going to see on internet lists of bad NBA suits for years to come. It's like a Frankenstein jacket. It's a vest sewn onto the front of a regular suit with a Nehru collar and then a pair of nice skinny slacks.
I'm surprised you're not with me on this one, Trey. This screams Trey Kirby to me with those big bright.
I have taste, Lee.
I'll tell you who was down on this. Ramon Sessions. Did you see this photo from the game? Look at Sessions there on the left. He is confused.
I think he's looking at the scoreboard.
No, he's looking at that jacket going, what is that?
I mean, the collar is confusing.
Yes. We saw Pau Gasol in just a black suit or a dark suit yesterday.
Yep.
Had a little bit of color, a little bit of style. Come
you said
on,
you didn't
guys.
like the red pants.
Yeah, well,
which one is
maybe
it?
not that much.
I just like the fact that we can now say thumbs men. Up, down, men.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, well, maybe
on the fence for
maybe we'll get some mess here. All right, final one here. The Sixers' new logos. They unveiled a whole lot of logos actually today. Their primary ones, and they got a whole bunch of secondary ones. I mean, here they are. Here's the look at, really. I guess
you're always down on new logos.
Well, look.
I'm a logo hater.
I'll say this, and we're going to get to the Franklin one on the right there. But this one, there's a little too much going on for me.
Yeah, I don't think I dig blue around.
I don't dig it. It's like, I don't know why they had to add all that stuff around it. But this is the one everyone's talking about today. It's the secondary logo. It's Ben Franklin driving with his left hand. Who knew Ben Franklin was left-handed? I had no idea. But I'm down. You guys like this?
I love the Ben Franklin. I agree with you. The primary logo is a little too samey. It seems like every new logo these days is a basketball with a picture on it and then some sort of word mark around it. But I love the Ben Franklin one. It's very old school to me. You see all the logos we've had recently.
Yeah.
It's like a baseball league around here. There's a reason we're not talking about baseball. Boring.
I don't mind it. I think they kept it pretty close to the original. They didn't sort of overdo it too much. They just sort of gave it a bit of a spruce up. Yeah. So I'm fine with it.
It's pretty traditional. I mean, this one you're never going to see.
Nah.
I think they're going to use this one a lot. Look how great it is. It's like the old dribbling buck back in the day. It's very old school.
Well, let's hear what the people think. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or Lee Ellis's just straight down the middle.
No opinion?
No,
cool.
right there, right there. All right, gotta take a break. One more break. When we come back, Lee's very solid play of the night, and we'll look ahead to tonight's 2 games. Come on back. You're watching the starters.
Lee's paid not to give his opinion.
Yeah. Thanks for taking a stance. Back to the starters. Time for Lee's VSP. Where are we going, Lee?
We're going to Washington, and it's Kyle Korver with a Manu Ginobili-like pass. Look at this. Woo.
Whoa!
Yeah, Nene, he wasn't watching. Got to pay attention, Nene. Look at this. Kyle, beautiful. Paul Millsap with a layup, and that's what I call a very solid play.
Only
no
Nene's
sideways
hair was
thumbs.
longer.
Yeah, his hair almost clipped it. You're right. All right, a look at tonight's NBA schedule. Starts 7 p.m. Eastern. TNT, of course. We have the Bulls and the Cavs Game 5. That series tied at 2 games apiece. And then at 9:30 Eastern Time, Clippers and the Rockets. Clippers going to try and close it out on the road. Some news, though, from this Cavs-Bulls game. All-star guard Kyrie Irving, he will be limited again. He's got the sprained right foot, and he's got tendonitis in his left knee. Says he's going to play. LeBron says he's going to give us what he has. As for LeBron, he skipped the Cavs shoot-around this morning to rest his sprained ankle, which he hurt in Game 4, but he says he's a go. So both those guys playing for the Cavs. As for the Bulls, Pau Gasol, game-time decision as of recording. We saw him, you saw him in shoot-around today try and get back up and down the floor. He was laboring a little bit, so maybe unlikely. Gasol, game-time decision. Keep your eye on NBA.com. We'll be back tomorrow.
Yes, looking forward to that. Thanks for joining us, folks. And remember, people will talk about anything. I heard 2 men talk about the Australian cricket team today.
One of them right there. Brace the night, people.
They were very smart.
How boring is that?